Welcome back to the show. So glad you're here. In this episode, we're going to dive deep into labor challenges, recruiting versus hiring, and the costs of turnover versus the costs of creating that really strong dream team. There's also the dark side of the business. We're going to talk about theft abuses, how to avoid them, checks and balances, where some of these losses are happening in your business. And most of all, we're going to talk about the power of data, where the data is found, what you want to be looking at, and what you can do with the data to move your business to the next level. So you're not going to want to miss this episode. Stay tuned. If you like what you're hearing, we would so appreciate you leaving us a review on your favorite podcast player. It'll help other operators or leaders just like yourself find us. And if you have an idea for an upcoming topic you'd like us to cover, or a guest perhaps you wish that we would interview, drop me a line or any business challenge you're having. I'll answer your emails. My email is Roger, R-O-G-E-R, at restaurantrockstars.com. Now, on with the episode.
You're tuned in to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. Powerful ideas to rock your restaurant. Here's your host, Roger Bodwin.
Running my restaurants taught me that the right tools move your business forward. So I'm a fan of Touch Bistro. It's more than just a POS, it's an all-in-one restaurant management system built by restaurateurs. Touch Bistro helps speed up service, reduce errors, and turn tables faster, while loyalty programs, online ordering, and contactless payments boost your bottom line. Plus, real-time analytics, inventory tracking, and staff scheduling are game changers. Want to learn more? Reach out to my friend Becky at BTARTICK@touchbistro.com or give her a call at 647-360-3994. She'll give you the full scoop and take great care of you. Listen, running a restaurant is tough, but making it wildly profitable doesn't have to be. If you're tired of struggling with cash flow, low margins, staff that don't sell, or just feeling overwhelmed, you've got to check out my Restaurant Profit Fast Track. It's inside the Restaurant Academy, and I walk you through exactly how to master your numbers, train a rockstar team, and scale with real profit centers that work. Join now at restaurantrockstars.com/join academy. Unlimited staff accounts are included. Let's start making your restaurant super profitable. Welcome back to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. So glad you are here. And Russ, welcome to the show today. I'm glad to have you.
Thanks very much, Roger. I'm happy to be here.
You're all about operations and operational efficiencies, but let's talk a little bit about your philosophies on leadership and training and team building in an organization. Regardless of the size of the restaurant, I think those are foundational elements that maybe many operators are missing, and they're wondering, it's like, how do I get the most out of my people? How do I get consistency and accountability, perhaps?
Absolutely. My view is that you have to have a clear understanding of who your customer is, what it is that you're delivering to those customers in terms of experience, and what differentiates you from the other competitors. And then, as you pointed out, in an industry like this, turnover is very high. And so it's very important to hire the right people, have a clear understanding of how you're going to deliver services to your customers, compensate them, train them well, and give them a lot of feedback on a recurring basis. And if you can do some of those things, and you can create a rewarding environment for people to exist in and to work in, and they feel appreciated, then you'll be on the good side of that retention metric and keep more people than your competitors.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is about recognition. People do work for a paycheck, of course, but I think they thrive on knowing that they're contributing to the greater good, and that you're giving them the feedback that they need to hear to make sure that they feel comfortable and feel confident in what they're doing. And then obviously, when you recognize that in other people that work for you, opportunities where they could get to the next level. And that happened a lot in my business. Let's switch for a moment, because I know you're a big believer in the word intrapreneur, and I think you started your career being an intrapreneur before you became an entrepreneur. Can you define what that word means, what that means to you, and how you can develop those types of people in any organization?
To me, entrepreneurial means being able to demonstrate entrepreneurship inside of a structured environment. And most people are not entrepreneurs, but everyone can be an entrepreneur, is the way I would say it.
I would agree.
Most of us work at least some point in our lives for larger organizations. And what every organizational leadership is looking for is people that are thinking about the business and thinking about how to improve the business. And that obviously ties back to their paycheck, but having a healthy business is good for everyone. And if you can bring your thought process and your brain power to bear on the opportunities and challenges that any business is having, management will appreciate that. Management wants people to come in and say, have we tried this? Or maybe we should do that. Or I've come up with a great idea about how we can change this mode of operation or this menu item or marketing positioning or whatever it might be. And you don't always have to be right, but I think that if you cultivate a culture, if you cultivate an environment where that is embraced and where people feel comfortable going outside the box, if you will, then the experience and the benefits will accrue to both of you. In other words, the company will have a flow of new ideas on how to do things, and the individual will feel more valued, especially if one of their ideas is put into practice. In my personal case, have always looked for ways to improve the operation, to work within the constraints of the organizations that I was part of, to try to be creative and try to think about how to improve the business's operations and change processes and those kind of things. It's worked out for me, frankly. I think it's a mindset as well. If I'm just collecting a paycheck and I'm here punching the clock and putting in my hours, that's not very inspiring for anybody. It's not inspiring for me as the clock puncher, and it's not inspiring for the business. And it certainly won't inspire customers or make them happy. Whereas if you're listening to people's ideas and you cultivate an environment of encouraging that, then everybody wins. The leaders of the business will benefit from the brain power that's being applied to the opportunities and challenges. The individual that's producing that is going to end up feeling more highly valued, and it's going to be non-monetary value, right? It's not that I'm giving you lots of extra money. It's that I'm giving you respect and I'm showing that I believe in you and that I believe in your ideas. And that's going to come through in the way that we all, both management and the team, interacts with customers. And it's a kind of virtuous cycle, if you will. Everything feeds on each other and it benefits everybody along the pathway.
Yeah, I think you're talking about those who see opportunity and have sort of passion for what they're doing and take initiative, and show some ambition. And that sets you apart from the other team members. And you can easily be recognized. And especially if you want to move up in this business in hospitality. And I know this is one business where you can start out at the bottom and end up owning restaurants without a formal education. If you've got that passion and if you're eager to learn and if you show that you're going to contribute more than the next employee next to you. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now, it's the labor crisis. We can call it a crisis since the pandemic. There are a lot of restaurants still struggling with that key piece. And you mentioned a moment ago, finding great people. But you can drive down I say this all the time, drive down any street USA, you still see the now hiring signs. What do you think about recruiting versus hiring? And is there a way to get these quality people through referrals and incentives and figuring out who really wants to be here versus someone who's going to collect a paycheck?
Absolutely. One of the first things you want to do is you want to leverage the employees that you have today, right? Done a reasonable job of staffing up. Yeah. You've got people that have personal networks and have personal relationships. And if their experience is good with your organization and you can put some incentives in place to help this along as well, then you've got a kind of a captive source where you're not competing out with the Indeeds and the LinkedIns of the world and the signs in the window. You've got an inside track. Somebody within your organization can provide insight in what it's like to work there. They can, if you're managing correctly, they're going to feel that the culture is a good benefit. And I think that's one of the best ways of recruiting people is through personal networks. So of course, it varies depending upon the size of the company and the way that it operates. But I think that's absolutely number one. I think like a lot of situations, especially in today's environment, when we're generally talking about relatively modest pay situations for most people, you've got to cast a wide net as well. So I think recruiting has to be multifaceted. You've got to leverage this internal network that you've got, but I recommend you use basically any different way that's available to you. So it includes the things that I just talked about, Indeed and signs in the window and LinkedIn, those other places. But you have to have a compelling message as to why
People want to come or should come.
why they need to come to you. And that means making sure that you believe in your business. And what I find is that when I'm enthusiastic and I can paint a vision of where we want to go, what we want to do. And for me, it's all about growth, and it's about both personal growth and company growth. And again, I think that's another one of those virtuous circles for people. I love what companies that are growing organically, right? You talked about initiative a few minutes ago. I think most people that are entrepreneurial, that do show initiatives, are the ones that become entrepreneurial, that become the ones that start their own restaurants and start their own businesses, and they build on what they've learned. So I think cast a very wide net, use the assets that you've got, which largely are related to culture and vision of where you want to go, and have a pretty strict set of criteria about who you want to hire. Bad breath is not as good as no breath. No breath is better than bad breath, in my view, because it takes a long time to fix a bad hiring mistake versus waiting until you find the right people, or at least someone that has a chance of evolving into the right kind of person.
To add to that, I absolutely agree. But to add to that, there is such a huge cost to turnover, especially in this business. And I know the statistics change, but it still costs thousands of dollars every time you hire someone, you get them up to speed and train them in a job. They work for you for a couple of weeks, and their average tenure, they say, is a couple of months for a new restaurant employee, average across this industry. And those are alarming statistics. But then when they leave, and then you got to start that process all over again, it costs that restaurant a couple $1,000s in lost wages and time and productivity and training and all these things. And no restaurant can afford this. So I think it goes back to what you said about creating that culture, recognizing talent. The team spirit and morale thing is so important, and not being the competition down the street, being better, showing people that you care about their contribution and making them feel valued. And yes, there's going to be the bad apples every now and again, but the recruiting piece comes in. Let me bring up a really genius idea that happened during the pandemic. And I love to share this because not everyone's heard it. And you said yourself, creative, turn over all the rocks. There's a chain of restaurants in Southern California that's open 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they got 28 locations. And then the pandemic hits, and then the whole labor thing happens, and they get back on their feet, and it's like, how do we possibly staff 3 shifts a day times 28 restaurants? And they came up with this idea of giving their loyal guests, their customers, gift cards for any referral that lasted 60 days. $250 gift cards if you bring me someone that you think would work out here. And if they do, I'm going to give you the gift card. They got
fantastic
plenty of, and I think they still use that today. And just to clarify, it didn't cost them $250. It was basically their food cost. So it could be pennies, it could be 30 cents on the dollar. And you've got a loyal guest now that you've just given a gift card. Hopefully you've trained that new staff person. They've lasted more than 60 days, and then you develop those people. And I'm like, wow, great idea. I wish I thought of it, but
no, it's an absolutely great idea. But once you don't want to lose them. And that's the problem. You talked a little bit about the costs of turnover, and it is a real cost. It is very, not just in terms of dollars, but in terms of management time and energy and effort. And obviously the objective is to keep that turnover as low as possible. So how do you understand how to do that? First of all, why are people leaving? I think you need to do exit interviews. You need to understand
find out why.
Why are you leaving us? We've invested in this. You've been a great employee for the period of time that you've been here. Why are you leaving? In today's world, a lot of that is money related. And I think it's important to do a really open-eyed evaluation of what does turnover cost versus what the compensation that you're offering people. If you think of it that way, rather than spend money on rehiring and retraining why not pay a little bit more, provide a little bit more benefit to people, give them a reason to participate, show them that they're loved, show them that they're valued inside the organization. And I think you can increase your retention by doing that. It's cultural. Much of it is cultural from my perspective. I think that the example that you gave is indicative of the way that company is thinking, right? They're trying to leverage all of their resources, get their customers to participate. A wonderful way to create an esprit de corps, to create we're engaged in a common endeavor where this is a joint endeavor to achieve things. Even if you're the customer, it's a joint endeavor. They want to come in and they want to have their favorite meal, and they want to have it with good service, and they're part of this as well, right? They're part of growth and the the development and the culture of the organization.
Absolutely. And that just fosters even greater loyalty if they think they contributed to your business and if it worked out and they got a reward for doing so. That's just a win-win all the way around. I'm glad you agree. I thought it was a genius idea.
Yeah, great idea.
So that's all the pluses and the morale and the team building and how we find great people. There is a dark side of our business, of course. Unfortunately, this restaurant business has its share of theft and bad practices and all that sort of thing. What are you seeing there? And what are the processes and procedures or the checks and balances, or how do we minimize that? But it's also the owner or the general leader's approach to not trying to squeeze everybody for every nickel and not trying to get the most out of them without paying them good wages. I think sometimes when people feel abused, maybe they're more likely to take advantage of things, but there are a lot of innocent abuses too. What do you see and what do you think? Lily's Fresh Pasta refuses to compromise on quality. This family-owned business, built on time-honored traditions passed down from Lily to her son Antonio, lives on with every batch. Lily's Fresh Pasta is made to European standards using 100% non-GMO, glyphosate-free Italian unbleached wheat. Lily's is served in the finest restaurants in America. I've had Lily's Fresh Pasta many times, and I can tell you it's always molto buono. Elevate your menu. Serve Lily's Fresh Pasta in your restaurant. Ask your local food service representative or call Antonio directly at 603-818-2100 and be sure to follow Lily's on Instagram at Lily's Fresh Pasta. Your restaurant team is the foundation of your business and most important asset. I know from experience that a happy team is a productive team that deliver great guest service experiences. Morale is the key. Check out myemployees.com/hospitality. My Employees offers impactful, consistent, and most of all, appreciated recognition programs that boost morale, reduce turnover, and drive guest satisfaction. My Employees is the industry benchmark, helping thousands of hospitality leaders build winning teams. Go to myemployees.com/hospitality.
There's a couple things, but I think the primary premise of what you say is correct. If people feel valued and they feel that they're part of a positive culture and they're being paid a fair wage for their work, they're going to be much less likely to steal. They're much less likely to take things away from them. If it's a antagonistic relationship, if it's a militaristic kind of environment, I think that inspires a different kind of passion, and that's the passion for not caring and, in fact, for hurting people. Now, how do you combat some of this stuff? My company's a data analytics company, and we're big believers in monitoring and in managing data. An example that I will give you is that there's all kinds of opportunities for employees to be your silent partners, right? They're trying to pad their pocket a little bit. They may do it through this technique we call sweethearting, which is to essentially give away value to people that they know, maybe friends, maybe family. There's a lot of different techniques for doing that. Obviously, if there's a lot of cash in the business, there's opportunities for that. If you're in a business that has alcoholic beverages, there's clear issues around the bar and around drink substitution and tip manipulation that can be monitored. This stuff can be monitored. A lot of this stuff can be monitored through the point of sale system. Point of sale system generates a tremendous amount of information, and it's important to understand what's happening on the ground. And if you take a little time and look at the people and what their performance is, you can gain some insights about the ones that are more likely than others to be these silent partners. Some of the structural things also problematic. Loyalty abuse is a huge issue today, where a cashier will use their own loyalty card instead of a customer if a customer isn't a loyalty participant. And you can monitor that stuff pretty easily by looking at the POS data against the way the loyalty cards are used and how frequently loyalty cards are delivered and those kinds of things. Another big area that we see is in managers. Again, smaller organizations tend to be running the show themselves, but if you're operating with managers that are working for you, usually you empower those managers to do some things like comping meals or comping desserts or comping those kinds of things. That's an area that can be a big abuse. The value and the effectiveness of limited time offers and how discounts are applied. Watching these things, looking at these things over time and identifying anomalies in the data, things that are working not in the way that you expected them to, but in other ways, and then most of the time, can be used as a training opportunity, right? You point out to someone how they misapplied a discount or maybe applied discounts if there are multiple discounts in the wrong order or those kinds of things. So really what you get at there is you really got to know your people, right? You've got to understand your people. You've got to have a relationship with your people. You can't be a tyrant in these organizations because that'll increase your turnover very quickly. And now you can go the other way. You don't want to trust people too much because at least in our experience, we've had situations where companies use our technology to come in, and what they find is that the associate that's been there for 10 years has been most trusted is also the one that's figured out all the angles and where the gaps are between the control systems that you have. So I think you have to have control. I think you have to have data analytics. But the main thing you have to do is you have to have a relationship with your people. You've got to understand what the characteristics of the people you have are, and you need to minimize the opportunities that they would have to be these silent partners or other sources of the leaky book.
Yeah, I mean, you can make money in this business, but there's lots of ways to lose money. And if you don't have those controls in place, this reminds me, when I was back in this business 30-something years ago, I had a really busy restaurant with a bar. And I know that certain abuses started to happen where people were running tabs, bartenders behind the new hires, they're running tabs and whatnot. And then their friends, they would charge them for one drink and they would ring it through at the end. And then they'd get the cash for the rest and put it in their pocket. And these are simple ways, but if you're not watching, so we obviously quickly implemented it. No, you ring in every single drink, no tabs allowed. And if they know you're watching, I think too, you got to know this business inside and out, and your people need to know that you know this business so that chances are if you do anything, you're going to be caught doing it because the owner, the leader, whoever knows that, you know, what you're doing.
That's yin and the yang. You got to understand them and you got to support them.
Right.
And you also have to let them know that there are standards. You talk about drinks and you just gave me a cash example, but even in the credit card world, there are certain things you can look at. You look at the ratio of tips to drinks, for example. When you've got a $20 check and you see a $20 tip on top of it, I would be very concerned about that, right? I would
Oh, yes.
One of the things that we encourage people to do is to look at the average, establish an average, what is the average ratio of, in a bar environment, what's the average ratio of tip to drinks or to drink value? And then look at anomalies, things that are above or below that. And the ones you want to worry about is the ones that are above that. If you're looking at someone that's consistently getting 50, 60, 70, maybe 100% tips on top of their their checks, then you need to
huge red flag. Yes.
Big time.
So you have a data analytics company, and that's the key to your business today. So let's dive into data right now, because data is the key to strategy, and it's the key to loyal, happy guests and knowing as much as you can about these guests and what their spending habits are and recognizing people that come in all the time. And that's just a small piece of it. But let's talk about what data is most important. And before you answer that, there's a lot of restaurants out there that are missing out on data because they're using these online ordering and delivery platforms. And those companies traditionally own the data. They don't share the data, but there is POS data. But what is the key data that operators should be capturing, and what can they do with it to optimize their operation?
Well, we recommend, certainly POS data is critical. You mentioned third-party ordering and delivery systems, and I agree with you that they want to control a lot of the data, but there is some metadata that you have, right? Which of those organizations are delivering to individual customers? If we're talking about delivery aspect of it, I encourage everyone to monitor the social media feeds. There are now some companies out there, we don't do this, although we're contemplating doing some of this. There are companies out there that will monitor social media feeds for you and will provide you with some summary information about what people are saying. And when you combine that with the third-party delivery system and you look at trends of people that are satisfied or dissatisfied based on which delivery system they were using, you can start making decisions about which of those partnerships, which of those third-party operators are best to work with. But POS data is critical. Just knowing the menu items, the human resources file, and knowing where people are at. So we typically advise customers to look at 6 pieces of data. POS is number one. That's probably the richest availability because it has a lot of detail. It has a lot of information in there. It tells you everything that they bought. It tells you what was taxed, what the tips were, if it's a tipping environment. if there's a third-party e-com operating system or a loyalty program that's got an ordering capability in it, that needs to be brought in. Human resources file, the menu items, and even the store location. Again, if it's a single location, then you can put a lot of your attention obviously directly on it. I like to say to our customers is that once you have two locations, then you need to have somebody be you in the other location. You can't run both locations at the same time. And having that information, understanding the differences between the two, the differences between the client base, and then accumulating historical data is probably the most important thing from my perspective. Being able to compare what's happening today versus yesterday versus last week versus last month.
I was a huge believer in that. Absolutely.
Looking at the way the business fluctuates based on time of day. So in day part analysis, I think is very important. If you're open for multiple meals, day of the week, season of the year, even bringing in weather data can help you do this stuff. Now, again, for a single location operator, that may be asking a little bit too much, but there increasingly today, there's more and more data being driven every day. And the trick is figuring out which of those data sources are giving you elements that will help you make a better decisions on a daily basis. And that can be a little daunting and a little difficult, but paying some attention to that is going to yield pretty significant results versus ignoring those things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Whether you do it digitally or you do it old school like I did 11 years ago, we tracked every single day's sales historically. We wrote copious notes about what the weather was, what happened, did a bus group show up unexpectedly, whatever it was, and that data was used to plan future schedules and to plan ahead. And you get to know over a period of time, is there consistency to my business? And when there's an anomaly, why did it happen that way? And then comparing that sales data, comparing your labor cost to sales on a weekly basis was something we were obsessed with doing. These are minute details that make a big impact on the bottom line. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. It does require you to be a detail-oriented person. I absolutely agree. And I agree that if you have no other way of doing it, then you need to do it manually. You need to be detail-oriented. You need to keep records, and then you need to keep them over time. And most of the companies that provide software to do this stuff, and there are many of them out there today. They maybe target different places, but these are people that in most cases were successful doing it on their own using a piece of paper. They said, how do I automate that? How do I make it easier for people to accumulate that stuff and gain insights from it? And so you're absolutely right. It's a critical thing. And if you want to be successful, you need to know how your businesses operate. I think now you're speaking to running a business versus running a restaurant. And those are two entirely different things. You may have gotten into the restaurant business because you've got a passion for food, or maybe you're a chef, but you can't just put out great food and good service and hope for the best. You got to make money on what you're doing, which also, I guess, is a parlay into the next question. Let's talk about menu engineering, because your menu is your biggest marketing tool in your restaurant. It's where you're making money. You could be losing money. You could be filling your seats, but your menu just isn't profitable, and it could be all over the place. And I see that a lot. What do you see? And what do you think?
We see that all over the place. We see people having a view, as you point out, there's a big difference between running a business and being a foodie. And I don't know what the statistics are. You probably know them better than I do, Roger, but some large number of restaurants fail, right? Within the first year or two.
Absolutely. That's still happening, and it has for decades. Hard business to be in.
Happens everywhere. So,
right.
So what I say is you have to come back to data, right? You've got to understand, first of all, what your food costs are, what it costs you to prepare a meal, prepare a menu item.
Yeah, the plate costs on every dish.
And you've got to monitor that over time because things change and they're not going to stay static. You've got to look at the prep time and the amount of labor and the ability that you have to deliver a fresh, attractive dish to the customer. And then you got to monitor what's selling and what's not selling. These are business 101 things. You don't have to have 600 items on your menu like a New Jersey diner, which is one of my wife's big complaints about New Jersey diners. Is that
you can get anything.
How can they possibly do everything well? And I
Right.
think that idea is not that far away from most people's thinking. So, to do a few things really well is one strategy. To do a lot of things and can be more daunting. But the key is learning over time, right? Learning at what's successful, incorporating the costs, understanding what your margins are on each meal, looking at what's successful and what's not successful, And then over time, making adjustments to your menu that stress the profitable, high volume items, maybe with a couple of specialties or loss leaders. A lot of people use loss leaders. Promotions, limited time offers are often don't work. Many times they don't work. And so I think that you have to be very detail oriented. You have to pay attention to what's happening on an ongoing basis. You got to constantly be rethinking and rejiggering what's on the menu and how the dishes are put together. And over time, you'll get better and better at it. But that's not necessarily chef thinking, right? That's much more business operations and wanting to make a profit and wanting to understand how to grow the business. If you can't grow your business and you can't operate profitably, then your restaurant's going to close. And
Yeah,
so,
game over.
Yep. So if you want to be an owner, you want to be able to feed your kids and grow your business, you have to pay attention to these kinds of details.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That's terrific. Why don't you give us an overview of Agilence?
So Agilence is a data analytics company, and we concentrate on both retail, restaurants, and supermarkets. And basically what we are all about is helping companies make better use of the data that they have. I already mentioned that systems today are generating tons of data.
Yes.
There's clocks, there's timers, there's kitchen timers, there's drive-through timers, there's the POS system, there's ingredients, there's supply chain, supplier data. All of this sits in different venues. And so the idea that we have is to bring it together, put it away in a database that makes it easy to access. And then the key is providing a tool that allows the average person, not a data scientist, not a PhD or even an MBA, to ask reasonable questions about these resulting databases and to get answers in a meaningful way that's going to let them make better decisions today, right now, as they're going through the day-to-day business. Now, lately, we've been fortunate to start using some AI tools to do some of this stuff, and create. So where in the past, we've had this tool to ask questions of the database that required you to understand a little bit about how to kind of ask the question in a way that the database would understand. Today, with AI coming along, we're quickly getting to the point where you can simply speak what you want. I want to know how many times yesterday each of my servers had an upsell or made an upsell of a dessert or sold an extra bottle of wine or sold an extra item, and have the system go back out into the database and provide you with that answer.
That's incredible.
And you can array the results. This is one of the things that we encourage people to do around revenue enrichment and revenue enhancement, is to understand which of your servers are the superstars, which are the ones that are encouraging people to buy more, encouraging people to get some bagels to go with that lunch that they're buying.
Suggestive selling through hospitality. I'm a big believer.
Yep, absolutely. And what I'm saying is get the data that helps you coach people, right? We recommend that you monitor that expansion selling capability on an ongoing basis and that you have regular feedback with your folks. So anyway, those are the kinds of things that we do. It's really about democratizing access to the data, making it accessible to the average person without having to have a data science degree or an MBA. It's strictly to try to do the things that you already know you want to do. Most people that are working in your business know what their job is. And if they can get access to some of the data, they can make better decisions on how to execute on their job. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, thank you so much for summarizing. Russ, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks. I've enjoyed it.
That was the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. Thanks so much to our audience for tuning in. Thank you to the sponsors of this week's show. We can't wait to see you all in the next episode, so stay well and stay tuned. Restaurants sell tons of fried food, and your customers love it. But the hassles, hazards, and mess of fryer oil, cleaning hoods, and all that grease, well, you can forget all that with Restaurant Technologies. They deliver your oil, filter it, monitor usage, collect and recycle your waste cooking oil. Their AutoMist system automates your hood and flue cleaning, eliminating the fire risk. As a Restaurant Technologies customer, you'll also save 10 to 15% in your insurance premiums. Plus, get a bonus for new customer referrals. Get started at rti-inc.com or call 866-399-3639.
Thanks for listening to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. For lots of great resources, head over to restaurantrockstars.com. See you next time.